A storm of curses erupted through the quiet street. A man, red-faced and raging, stood phone clutched in hand, spewing venom into the 911 receiver. "There's a black man causing trouble here. Get him arrested." The peaceful morning air was brutally torn apart by the piercing wail of police sirens. Officers descended, grabbing the black man's wrist, handcuffs glinting, just moments from clamping shut. Across the street, the white man who'd made the call smiled, a radiating mask of satisfaction. The hushed whispers of gathering neighbors only intensified the suffocating atmosphere. Then a voice, authoritative and thunderous, sliced through the chaos. "Stop right now." Everyone froze, heads snapping toward the sound. Striding into the scene with an undeniable commanding presence was the city's mayor. Her eyes blazed with righteous fury as she pointed a finger directly at the officers. "Release him immediately," she commanded, her voice so forceful it could shatter stone. The man who had been smiling moments before now understood. He had made a grave mistake. Join us in sharing impactful and meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to enable the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and a sense of compassion. The warm morning sun bathed a modest suburban street. Marcus Green, a black man in his early 50s, meticulously trimmed the bushes lining his front yard. Known throughout the neighborhood as a kind, hardworking and helpful soul, Marcus was meticulously preparing his home for a long-awaited visit from his sister. He wanted everything to appear as neat and welcoming as possible. Though humble, his house was impeccably maintained, with vibrant flowers adorning the walkway, a detail his sister always admired. Marcus had also prepared a delicious meal for their reunion. As he carefully snipped away small branches, he whistled cheerfully, his face reflecting peace and relaxation. His mind was filled with the anticipation of a hearty meal, warm laughter, and the cozy atmosphere he hadn't experienced in a while. He hoped this day would add another beautiful memory to their shared history. The neighborhood was steeped in a peaceful, serene ambience. Across the street, a pickup truck rumbled along. Brian Miller, a middle-aged white man with a perpetually scowling face, struggled to maneuver his oversized vehicle. He muttered curses under his breath, complaining about everything from children playing to awkwardly placed trash cans hindering his parking. It was clearly not a good day for him. As the truck surged forward, its rear end collided with a large trash can at the curb, sending it toppling and spilling Marcus's trimmed branches onto the sidewalk and street. Brian cursed louder, slamming his truck door as he stepped out to inspect the mess. His gaze fell upon Marcus across the street, diligently trimming his bushes, oblivious to the incident. Brian's irritation quickly morphed into misplaced frustration. Scowling, he stood tall, a calculating look on his face, then stomped across the street. "Hey!" Brian barked, his voice hoarse and accusatory. Marcus looked up, startled by the sudden yell. "Yes?" he replied, lowering his clippers, his tone calm. "Are you just going to leave that mess there?" Brian pointed angrily at the scattered branches. Marcus frowned in confusion. "I didn't knock it over. I've been in my yard all morning trimming the bushes." Brian crossed his arms, his tone dripping with mockery. "Sure you didn't. You're standing here with clippers in your hand and there's a pile of branches over there. How is that not your problem?" Marcus took a deep breath, striving for composure. "Look," he said patiently, "I did put the branches in that trash can, but I didn't tip it over. If you need help cleaning it up, I'll help, but don't blame me for something I didn't do." Brian's face flushed with anger. "I don't need your help, but I'm not letting you off the hook. If you don't clean it up, I'm calling the police." Marcus felt his chest tighten. He stared at Brian in disbelief and disappointment. It wasn't the first time he'd faced baseless accusations, and the threat of police involvement hung heavily in the air. "Go ahead," Marcus said firmly. "I'm not cleaning up a mess I didn't make." Brian's expression hardened, his audacity peaking as he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Marcus stood his ground as Brian loudly reported, "There's a suspicious black man causing trouble. He knocked over a trash can and refuses to clean it up. You need to come arrest him." Marcus clenched his fists, bracing himself for what he knew could escalate into something much bigger. Minutes later, the distant sound of sirens shattered the neighborhood's calm. The once quiet street grew tense as neighbors peered through curtains or stepped onto their porches, curious about the commotion. Marcus stood on his lawn, his body tense but his expression controlled, though a flicker of unease crossed his face. A police cruiser screeched to a halt outside Brian's house. Two officers emerged. Officer Blake, a stocky, middle-aged man with a stern demeanor, and Officer Ramirez, younger and visibly uneasy. They assessed the scene. A pile of branches on the ground and a black man holding clippers near a neatly trimmed hedge. Their eyes immediately fixed on Marcus. "There he is," Brian shouted, pointing dramatically at Marcus as he approached the officers, his face flushed with indignation, his gestures exaggerated as if he were the victim of a heinous crime. "What seems to be the problem here?" Officer Blake asked, his tone brisk and authoritative. Brian didn't hesitate. "This guy knocked over a trash can and refused to clean it up. Then he got aggressive when I called him out on it," he said, his voice dripping with anger. Marcus stepped forward, his hands at his sides in a non-threatening posture. "That's not true," he said, his tone calm but firm. "I've been working in my yard the whole time. He knocked over the trash can and decided to blame me for it." Blake's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. "Sir, we're just trying to figure out what happened here," he said curtly. "Why would he accuse you if it wasn't true?" Marcus felt his chest tighten further, frustration bubbling under the surface. He took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. "I don't know why he's doing this, but I haven't done anything wrong," he said, his voice tinged with exasperation. Brian scoffed, crossing his arms. "Sure, because a guy holding clippers isn't responsible for the branches on the ground," he muttered, loudly enough for everyone to hear. Officer Ramirez glanced at Blake, then at Marcus, hesitating. "Sir," he said cautiously, "do you have anyone who can vouch for your story? Because from what we see, you're the only one who could be responsible for the mess." Marcus clenched his jaw, his eyes scanning the gathering crowd of neighbors. Most avoided eye contact, their faces a mix of discomfort and curiosity. He sighed and attempted to explain. "Yes, those branches are from my yard and I put them in the trash can, but he knocked it over and is now blaming me." Blake rolled his eyes, clearly losing patience. "Look, it seems pretty straightforward to me," he said. "If you didn't do it, why not just clean it up and move on?" Marcus tightened his fists at his sides, his voice, though calm, carried the weight of years of similar encounters. "Because this isn't about the trash," he said quietly. "It's about him accusing me of something I didn't do, and I'm not going to play into that." Blake stepped closer, his hand hovering near his belt. "Sir, I need you to cooperate," he said, his tone growing colder. "You're going to need to come with us to the station and sort this out." Those words hit Marcus like a blow. His breathing quickened, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple despite the cool morning air. "Arrest me?" he repeated, disbelief evident in his voice. "For what?" "Standing in my own yard." From behind the officers, Brian smirked, his arms still crossed, clearly relishing the situation. "See? He's being aggressive," Brian said smugly. "I told you he was trouble." Ramirez shifted uncomfortably, his brows furrowed. "Blake," he said quietly, "maybe we should—" Blake cut him off with a sharp gesture. "No, Ramirez, we've got this under control." Marcus's jaw tightened as his eyes swept over the growing crowd of onlookers. He could feel their stares, some sympathetic, others judgmental. His mind raced with worst-case scenarios. Being handcuffed in front of his neighbors, his name tarnished, and videos of the incident spreading online without context. Blake reached for his handcuffs and moved toward Marcus decisively. "Put your hands out," Blake ordered loudly. "We're going to sort this out at the station." Marcus's face flushed with anger and shame at the injustice he was enduring. He didn't want to escalate the situation but also didn't want to comply with something so blatantly unfair. Slowly, he placed the clippers on the hedge and began to raise his hands, moving carefully. Suddenly, a voice rang out, loud and commanding, cutting through the heavy air of injustice and absurdity. "Stop right now." Everyone froze just as Marcus felt the weight of the situation crushing him. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. The door opened and out stepped Sophia Green, the city's mayor and Marcus's sister. She was dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, her calm demeanor exuding authority. Her heels clicked sharply against the pavement as she walked toward the group, her gaze cold and unwavering. Sophia had planned to visit her brother that morning, a rare moment of respite amid her packed schedule, but a last-minute meeting had delayed her. Now as she saw Marcus standing tense and surrounded by two officers and an accusatory Brian Miller, her purpose for being there shifted entirely. "Marcus!" Sophia called, her voice sharp but steady, drawing everyone's attention. Her eyes swept over the scene, taking in Marcus's clenched fists, Brian's accusatory stance and the officer's stern expressions. Marcus turned toward her, relief washing over his face. "Sophia," he said, his voice tight with emotion. Brian's smug confidence began to waver as recognition dawned. His face paled. "Is that the mayor?" he muttered. The two officers exchanged uneasy glances. Blake, who had been seconds away from cuffing Marcus, straightened abruptly. Ramirez looked down, his hand fidgeting nervously at his side. Sophia stepped closer to the group, her cold gaze landing on Brian. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her tone leaving no room for evasion. Brian opened his mouth to speak, but Sophia raised a hand to silence him. "Marcus," she said, turning to her brother, her expression softening slightly. "Tell me what happened." Marcus took a deep breath, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. "Brian knocked over the trash can on the curb and blamed me for it. He called the police when I refused to clean it up. Now they're threatening to arrest me for standing in my own yard." Sophia's jaw tightened as she turned her icy gaze to Brian. Then she addressed the officers. "Is this true?" Blake hesitated, his voice stiff. "Ma'am, we received a report of a disturbance. Mr. Miller here claimed that." Sophia cut him off with a sharp motion of her hand. "Did you verify his story? Did you speak to any witnesses? Check the neighborhood cameras? Or did you just take his word and assume my brother was at fault?" Blake's face reddened, beads of sweat beginning to form on his temple. "We are handling the situation, ma'am," he stammered. "Handling it?" Sophia repeated, her voice rising slightly. "By threatening to arrest an innocent man without evidence? That's how you're handling it?" Ramirez cleared his throat, stepping forward cautiously. "Mayor, there may have been a misunderstanding." Sophia turned to him, her expression softening just enough to acknowledge his attempt at reason. "Misunderstanding? There's no misunderstanding here. My brother was falsely accused, and instead of investigating, you've escalated the situation." Brian, who had been awkwardly lingering on the sidelines, tried to interject. "Well now, wait a minute." Sophia's glare silenced him immediately. "You've done enough damage," she said icily. "I'll deal with you shortly." Sophia pulled out her phone and made a call. "This is Mayor Green," she said briskly. "I need access to the security footage for the 700 block of Oakwood Avenue immediately. Send it to my office within 5 minutes. Ending the call, she crossed her arms, her sharp gaze sweeping over everyone present. "We'll settle this right now." Minutes felt like hours as everyone waited. Marcus stood silently, his breathing steady but his posture tense. Sophia's presence had calmed him, but the weight of the situation lingered heavily. Blake shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence eroded. Ramirez fidgeted nervously, occasionally glancing at his partner. Meanwhile, Brian's face glistened with sweat, the dawning realization of his mistake etched across his features. When Sophia's phone rang, the tension in the air snapped. She answered swiftly and opened the footage. The video clearly showed Brian's truck backing into the trash can, causing it to topple and spill its contents. It also captured Brian angrily stomping across the street to confront Marcus, who was focused on trimming his bushes, completely unaware of the incident. Sophia held up the phone for everyone to see, her expression unreadable. "Would you like to explain this, Mr. Miller?" she asked, her tone icy. Brian's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "I didn't think it was that big of a deal," he stammered. "Not a big deal?" Sophia's voice was razor sharp. "You falsely accused my brother, wasted police resources, and attempted to use your privilege to bully someone. That's not just a big deal, it's unacceptable." She turned to the officers, her tone unwavering. "And you two? What would have happened if I hadn't shown up? Would you have taken my brother to jail based on this man's lies?" Ramirez quickly shook his head. "No ma'am, Blake, pale and stiff, stepped forward. "We made a mistake," he admitted reluctantly. "A mistake." Sophia shot back, her voice filled with scorn. "This wasn't a mistake, it was negligence and bias. You're supposed to protect this community, not perpetuate injustice. I'll be filing a formal complaint with your department." Sophia turned to Marcus. her expression softening as she placed a hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. Marcus nodded, his voice steady now. "I'm fine thanks to you." Sophia offered him a small smile before turning back to Brian and the officers. Her expression hardened once more. "This ends here and I will make sure it doesn't happen again." With that, she guided Marcus back toward his house, leaving the crowd buzzing with whispers. Brian stood awkwardly by the curb, his face pale as the weight of his actions sank in. Neighbors stared at him, their judgment palpable, every glance a condemnation, a reminder of his disgrace. The officers remained by their cruiser, engaged in a tense discussion, their earlier authority replaced by discomfort and shame. Inside Marcus's house, a sense of peace finally returned. Marcus sat at his dining table rubbing his temples. "I don't know what I did to deserve that," he said quietly, his voice a mix of frustration and exhaustion. Sophia sat across from him, her eyes softening as she took his hand. "You didn't deserve it," she said firmly. "That's the problem. You did nothing wrong, and yet people like Brian think they can weaponize lies and fear simply because they feel entitled to control spaces they don't own." Marcus exhaled deeply, his fingers tightening around hers. "I keep thinking if you hadn't shown up, what would have happened? Would I be sitting here now, or would I be in a cell trying to explain myself to people who wouldn't listen?" Sophia's chest tightened at his words. The thought of Marcus being taken away, further humiliated, was almost too much to bear. She squeezed his hand firmly. "That's why this has to stop," she said resolutely. "And it starts here, with Brian, with those officers, and with every system that enables this kind of behavior." Outside, the crowd began to disperse, though many lingered, casting glances at Brian. He stood frozen near the curb, his hands stuffed into his pockets. His earlier bravado had vanished, replaced by a growing awareness of the humiliation he had brought upon himself. The officers remained by their vehicle, speaking in hushed tones. Ramirez looked visibly shaken, his brows furrowed as though questioning every decision he had made. Blake, on the other hand, stood rigid, his professional mask barely concealing his discomfort. Inside the house, a long-awaited peace settled. Marcus and Sophia sat together, sharing stories about their work and family over a warm, hearty meal. The tension of the morning began to fade, replaced by laughter and the simple joy of being together. And now we invite you to join the movement for justice. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and make stories like this part of your daily life. Together we can create real change.